Hello, and from us, good morning. I'm Gretchen Batra. I'm an AARP volunteer in the mountain region of North Carolina. And today, again, we've got Celeste Collins from OnTrack. And we're so glad you're here. And before we get started, Celeste, I just want to let people know that you can put questions and comments in the comment box, and that should be on the right of your screen, or depending on your computer, it might be at the bottom of your screen. Also, at the end, we're going to have an evaluation that comes up, and that's really critically important for us because we get feedback that helps us improve our show, and we're going to be back next month, so you want us to do the best possible. So really encourage you to do the evaluation. It takes about maybe 2 minutes. It's not one of those 15-minute deals, so I really encourage you to do that. So Celeste, you're the executive director of OnTrack Financial Education and Counseling. Can you tell us a bit about, for people that weren't here last month, a bit about what that is?
Yes, I would love to. Thank you so much, Gretchen, and thank you to AARP for having me back to do another show to talk about money and you and debt. OnTrack Financial Education and Counseling is located in Asheville, North Carolina. We serve the 18 western counties in the state, and we're a nonprofit United Way funded agency. And we help people with money stuff, money and credit. We help people figure out what their housing and money goals are. We help people get out of debt, and we'll talk about some of those tips today. We help people learn how to buy homes, avoid foreclosure. We help older adults figure out about reverse mortgages and whether that's a good thing for them or not. We also help people build savings and improve their credit. So it's everything money. And right now it's tax season. So we have a free tax preparation site that we're helping people do their taxes at no fees.
Wow. You've got lots of different programs. It's really exciting what all you have. Well, as you said, today we're focused on debt and debt stress. It's the stress of don't answer the phone, don't go to the mailbox. It's really, we don't need any more stress in our life. We got enough, but we're going to focus on that. So what are some of the current trends in debt? And any that are special for midlife and older adults?
Well, thank you for asking. And yes, the pandemic and the consumer trends in debt are not very favorable for consumers these days. So, looking at Bloomberg, which is a wonderful publication that keeps up with financial kinds of things, they talk about revolving credit, which is credit cards and lines of credit and things like that, really surging. $19.8 billion is the amount that people owe, and it's the largest surge on record. So that's really scary to think about people building up that type of debt. But then also auto loans and school loans have gone up as well in the last 6 months. And so Bloomberg suggests that people earning less than $90,000 a year, which is a lot of folks, have exhausted their financial cushions, and that it's very stressful. Speaking of debt stress, for folks that are trying to make it through the pandemic times and then also the time of high inflation. I think about older adults, especially those living on a fixed income, and the inflation going up so much so fast has been a big burden on folks that are trying to make ends meet.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned car loans, and the price of cars, both new and used, has gone up astronomically. If you can even find a car.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. That's a big expense for most families, having a way to have transportation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the whole slowdown in the supply chain has been amazing. When you go to the store, I'm still seeing empty shelves in some areas. And, there's so many things that are just a challenge to get.
Absolutely. And then that drives prices up too, that whole supply and demand piece of economics that we all remember learning about in school. So yeah, that
Yeah.
increases the cost of things as well.
And that number, that big number you mentioned was billion with a B, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, as part of OnTrack services, your counselors work with people that have debt and debt stress, and they're, as we said, they're feeling overwhelmed. They're afraid to answer the phone. Although at times maybe it's best not to answer the phone because so many fraud comes in that way too. But anyway, they're afraid to answer the phone. They don't want to go to the mailbox. I guess you might even worry about answering the door. So what are advice you can share to help people?
Well, and some people are kind of taking a deep breath right now. It's after the holidays. The new year has started. And we talked about it last month's show, the idea of New Year's resolutions and getting a handle on finances. And sometimes debt is something that has gotten people's attention. Do find that human nature being what it is, that often over the holidays people kind of set the fact that their credit card balances are growing aside, and then kind of revisit it now that the new year has started. So the first thing that we always say is, let's get a handle on what's going on. So making a list. What debts are out there and what kind of debts are they? Because credit cards, medical debt, things like that, because those are unsecured debts, in other words, there's no collateral, there's not a house or a car that's standing good for the loan. Often those creditors are more assertive, shall we say, in trying to collect the debt. And so you'll get calls, you'll get letters and things like that. And sometimes folks, if they can't see the forest for the trees, we have seen consumers spend money on debts to try to get them paid down or paid off in a way that's not doesn't serve their bigger financial picture. So a first step is listing your debts, list the balances that you owe. Take a look at the last time you used that credit card, if it's a credit card, and decide, okay, is this something that is helping to supplement my monthly expenses? Because if that's the case, it's going to be hard to get out of debt if you're continuing to add to the debt. Write down the interest rates, write down the payment that you usually pay and when it's due. Getting a sense of what that looks like, then you can say, oh my goodness, I wasn't paying attention to ABC credit card, but it's got a 29.5 interest rate. I should be, if I'm going to prioritize my paying back of debts, I should prioritize the ones with the higher interest rates. Sometimes folks get free offers for zero balance interest or balance transfers with no interest for a set period of time. Those are not bad things, but you have to keep an eye on them, because often the fine print says, yeah, we'll give you a 0% interest for 6 months, but then after that it's going to shoot way up, and if you miss any payments during that period of time, then your interest rate's going to go up. So it can be overwhelming and it can be very stressful, especially when you look at the bottom line of your income compared to your expenses and just feel like you're in the hole. So folks can come see us virtually for a credit counseling appointment, a debt appointment, and we can help sort through some of those things. Over the years, we've had folks show up with plastic grocery bags full of unopened bills and just say, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this by myself. So opening your mail is an important thing. As you said, Gretchen, the
Yeah.
phone calls, screen those, because creditors can be very belligerent sometimes. They're not supposed to harass you. That's against the law, but they can make you feel really bad and really like their debt is the very most important thing. The folks that are calling you, that's their job. But being able to step back, realize what you can and can't afford, and then make your plans accordingly is super important.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple things that remind me of last month's show, which people can watch, but there were two things. And the confidential workbook that you have from OnTrack, as people are looking at all their debt and writing down credit card information and other kinds of information, as long as they're doing that, they might as well pop that information in the confidential workbook, which is a great tool to really get a big picture of financial instruments, but also things about family and who your lawyer and your, all the different people, financial people in your life. It's a real wonderful tool to have, because when you want to find, like your lawyer, you don't have to search all over for their phone number. You've got it right in that confidential workbook. So we encourage people to get that from you. And then AARP has this site called Money Map. So if you go to aarp.org/money map, you find all sorts of terrific information. So you can do a lot of work beyond what we're talking about here today. So I just wanted to link that in when you were saying write down your debt and so forth. That's critical, but save that piece of paper, because you can put the information in the confidential workbook.
Absolutely. And it is so important for yourself and then the folks that might be responsible for your finances if you were to end up in the hospital, or once you pass from this life into whatever's next. You don't want to add to the stress that your loved ones are facing by having your finances and your confidential information in disarray. So you're right, Gretchen, that confidential records, it's almost like a table of contents of things that your family or friends might need to take care of your business once you're not able to do that. So we do have that available on our website, and it's linked in the comment section as well. So yeah, thinking about debt, take a look at the forest. Take a look at each of the trees in the forest, all the credit that you owe, the car loans, house loans, equity loans, those kinds of things, and get a sense of what are the demands on the income that you have coming in. And then based on that, figure out where you want to start. I mentioned starting with the highest interest rate credit cards or whatever debt. Another way to look at the big picture, if you have something that has a little bitty balance and maybe it's not the highest interest rate, but you could knock that out in a couple of months, sometimes just that human nature of feeling some sense of accomplishment is really a nice thing. So it's like you got something that's $200 or $300 and you can knock that out in a few months. That's cool. Put the money towards that. A thing that we always caution people about, once people get excited about getting out of debt and they want to just put every extra cent they have towards their debt payment, that feels like the right thing when you start seeing how much the interest rates are. But a thing to be aware of is if you deplete all of your extra money towards paying off your debt and something comes up, even if it's like tires for your car or just, medical something that you have some bills to pay with that, you're going to end up going, oh my gosh, I don't have the money to cover that expense. So then oftentimes people say, well, the only solution is plastic. And so it's kind of this never ending cycle. So we always encourage folks to have some money in emergency savings before they go hog wild trying to pay off their debts. $1,000 is a good starting place. And then of course, experts say, oh, 3 to 6 months living expenses. And most of the time, if someone is not in the habit of saving, saying 3 to 6 months living expenses, they get the deer in the headlights look and think, I'll never get to that. So, so the $1,000 in emergency savings is a nice in between spot for people as they want to start tackling debts and get those high interest rates taken care of.
Yeah, if you had to get new tires right there, that takes a huge chunk out of that $1,000, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And when we work with people on budgets, there are the unexpected expenses, and then there are the expected expenses that don't come up every month. So we all, when we're doing budgets for folks, we try to build in that non-monthly expense, set aside for things like tires. But I do often see people who haven't planned for it and then face a multi-$100 expense when that kind of repair for their car is due.
Yeah, and like I pay my car insurance twice a year, so I need to budget, set aside knowing that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. Car insurance, house insurance, if your house is paid for, property taxes is another place where sometimes people get surprised, especially if they live in a high property tax area. And then suddenly they get a several $1,000 tax bill. And so, yeah, those non monthly expenses sometimes end up on credit cards because people have not planned ahead for those. Gretchen, one of the things we've seen during
Yeah.
the pandemic is that with the um, prevalence of home delivery services, online shopping, things like that.
Yeah.
And you go online and you order from a restaurant and they deliver it to your door, but you're using a credit card or a debit card. And so we've seen those kinds of expenses sneak up on people because they're not going to the
Oh,
grocery store
yeah.
and things like that. It's like, oh yeah, let's just order out food. And so then
Yeah.
suddenly the credit card bill comes and they're like, whoa, what happened? And particularly when it's a consumable like food that you've put on a credit card, it's like, goodness gracious. Um, Having money to pay that off when the bill comes is really important because you hate to think that you're paying interest on something that you don't even have anymore. Um, for
Yeah.
example, food from restaurants or grocery stores. And so we've seen people need to do a major overhaul with their budgeting because of the expenses of the pandemic.
Yeah.
The social media loves to send ads of things that they're sure you want, and so it's
Yes.
so easy, click, 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 and use your thumbprint, and suddenly you've paid for something on your credit card, and it arrives, and you go, "What was I thinking?"
Yeah.
So, um,
Exactly.
yeah, so those kinds of expenses, it's really important to take a look at, okay, where am I spending my money? What are the things that are enticing me to spend more money than I need to? And I'm not saying if that's your way of dealing with the pandemic that you should never do it again, but put some governors on, put some limits. Okay, I'm going to
Mhm.
let myself spend $25 a month or $50 a month. Um,
Ah,
on those kinds of things. So you give yourself
yeah.
a online shopping allowance and then keep yourself to it, because that's a way that it can get your money situation can get way out of hand. Your debt can get way out of hand if you don't have some governors on those kinds of expenses.
Right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of behaviors we've learned during the pandemic that as we move forward, we'll be still using, I think, getting things delivered, whether it's Chewy and your pet
Pets.
food or whatever. Because it's so convenient. So this will probably continue. And as you say, really, you really have to pay attention to that because it's so easy to just order something that comes to your door and
Absolutely. Absolutely. And especially with all the
yeah.
algorithms on social media, when they start sending you, it's almost like, whoa, were you listening to my phone conversation? And my friend has a new puppy, and suddenly I start getting these ads for dog food things and toys. So those just be aware. Be aware.
Right, exactly. Well, it seems like on television, there's a lot of commercials about debt reduction and debt relief. And so, what should people watch out for?
That's a
And do you have
great.
any do
Yeah.
you have any examples?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The TV commercials make you I mean, it's amazing. They'll have a picture that use black and white and this ominous music, and someone is just like, pulling their hair out and feeling so sad about debt, and then all of a sudden, whatever company it is will come on the scene, and color comes back in the person's life, and they're outside, they're pushing their children on swings because life is good again. And the voiceover says something like, we can settle your debts 50 cents on the dollar or 20, you don't have to pay all this back. And it sounds really good. And those ads often are in the middle of the night when people are up worrying about how they're going to make their financial needs with the income that they have coming in. But what that is typically advertising is something called debt settlement. And debt settlement is a very scary thing. The debt settlement companies are the ones that say, we'll settle your debt for 50 cents on the dollar. What they do is you do a enrollment. They give you all these promises about how they're going to settle your debt for so much less. You send them money every month, and they let that money accumulate. They ask you to re change the address for your credit card bills to the debt settlement company. So your bills, you're not getting
Oh,
your bills anymore. The debt settlement company is getting the bills. And the reason they do that is because they're letting your debt go bad. They're not sending any money to the credit card companies. They let it charge off. So there no payments, no payments. Your credit
Mm.
is absolutely trashed because the creditors have had to write the debt off as a bad debt. And then once that happens, then the debt settlement company says, okay, credit card company, um, Celeste owed $10,000. We'll give you 3,000. And the credit card company goes, well, no, not three, but how about four? And so then out of that,
Wow.
all that money that you sent to the debt settlement company, the debt settlement company pays off that settlement balance. So technically, you have settled your debt for cents on the dollar, but your credit is ruined, and they've been taking your money for all those months, and you have no idea that your credit is going down the toilet because you've redirected your credit card statements to those companies. Um, so that is something that is very enticing. It's illegal in North Carolina, but because there
Oh,
are
good.
yes, then that's great that it's illegal, but there's all these internet ads and things like that. So I know folks who have been sucked into those kind of situations, paid thousands of dollars, and we've helped people protest through the Attorney General. The North Carolina Attorney General's office is fabulous to help people who have fallen victim to a debt settlement company get money back when they have been really scammed out of the money that they've sent through the debt settlement company.
Mm.
So beware of debt settlement. It's that old adage: if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah.
And debt settlement is one of those things.
And can you give one example, kind of a little case study of somebody that this happened to? I mean,
Oh yeah.
I just, yeah.
Yeah, so over the years, we've helped a lot of people. One person in particular that I know of had paid for several years, had turned over her credit card to a settlement company because she was so desperate to try to get out of debt. She wanted to make good on her debts, but she was not making any progress with the high interest rates. And so she
Yeah.
had paid over $15,000 towards the debt settlement company, and came to us saying, "Oh my gosh, I might have made a big mistake. I don't, I'm not sure." And so we looked into it, realized it was one of the illegal debt settlement companies, and we were able to help her get $12,000 back through the Attorney General intervening on her behalf. So
So
if you're
when,
in a
yeah,
state, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so when people sign up for this, there's no way they can read the little fine print and all of that kind of thing. They
Um,
just are,
I think it's disguised enough, and people are
yeah.
desperate enough, and kind of, oh yeah, here's what you need to sign. Look over here, distraction techniques, and yeah, it's bad enough to where North Carolina has made it illegal. And if folks are
Mhm.
listening from other places in the country, you can go to your Attorney General's website for your state and find out if debt settlement companies are illegal in your state. One thing I want to say to older adults who might be listening: your children, if you have adult children, they could be in credit card debt. They could be looking for any solution out there. And so passing on information about being really careful with who you deal with in trying to handle your debt is super important. We do, through OnTrack Financial Education and Counseling, we offer a debt management plan, which is not debt settlement. It works with the hardship programs that creditors have in place to give people better interest rates and lower payments. But it
Mhm.
also requires some plastic surgery. Folks have to cut up their credit cards and be on a be on a cash budget. So that is
Yeah.
one thing that some people go, oh my gosh, not have a credit card, but the creditors are offering better deals through the debt management plan. And one of the things that we um, encourage and support is the person who signs up for debt management getting a balanced budget before we don't want to set people up to fail with those kinds of programs. So
Mhm.
credit counseling
Yeah.
agencies across the country offer debt management plans, and that could be a place that if you're struggling and trying to figure out, okay, what can I do about my debt, go into the nfcc.org. N is in national, F is in foundation, C is in credit, C is in counseling. NFCC.org has a locator service that you can find out if there's a credit counseling agency in your area.
Yeah, that reminds me, well, you're called OnTrack. A lot of places it's called consumer credit counseling, right? I
That's
mean, and
yeah.
and are they all nonprofits?
All the ones that are consumer credit counseling services of, fill in the blanks. We actually were founded in 1973 as Consumer Credit Counseling Service of Western North Carolina. So those are nonprofit credit counseling services. But there are some credit counseling services out there that aren't nonprofit or that have a for-profit entity that they're affiliated with. So just be careful. Look at the Better Business Bureau for some comments, because they're really good at tracking the agencies that you might not want to deal with and the ones that have good Better Business Bureau ratings.
Good. So for people from other states, that's really helpful
Mhm.
information. Okay, now what about using home equity loans or lines of credit such as you have with the credit card? Is that a good idea?
That's a great question, because sometimes people are very attracted to the fact that if they have a mortgage or a line of credit against their house, like a home equity, that they can take the interest off on their taxes. And the thing to be aware of is that if you're taking credit card debt and putting it on a mortgage or an equity line, you're turning something that's unsecured credit into secured credit. So you're saying, okay, these debts that I
Okay.
have, unsecured, no collateral, nothing that the creditor can come after if I default, moving that into secured, which means, okay, if I don't pay my bills, my house is at risk. So that's a little dramatic, but that's essentially what you're doing. It is a better interest rate. And so I'm not saying don't do it, but what I am saying is we have seen people who have gone that way. I'm going to get a second mortgage on my house and pay off my credit
Mhm.
cards. And I'll be darned if 5 years later, their credit cards are back up to the max, or to a dangerous level, and they have this debt on their house. So if you're looking at converting unsecured debt into home equity debt, make sure you've got your financial budget in order. Make sure you're putting money in emergency savings. Make sure that if you use credit cards, you're paying them off at the end of the month, and those balances don't just creep up, creep up, creep
Yeah.
up, because the worst thing is to have a ton of debt on your house and a ton of debt on credit cards, and thinking, years ago, that putting that credit card debt on your house is going to solve your problems. So getting real serious about tracking your money and your spending is super important before you convert credit card debt to home equity debt.
Yeah, people watching the show might want to because this will be available um, online all the time. So people might want to refer other people, friends, or kids to this show, because you've
Yes.
just given us a lot of information about some pretty scary things.
Yeah,
Okay,
thank
well, yeah, I'm looking for any questions or comments. Nothing's come in so far, but I want to remind people that we will have the evaluation, and we truly want you to fill out the evaluation. And before we wind up, we want to mention that next month on Wednesday, March 16th, the same time, and at 10:30 Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be talking about money in housing. And we touched a little bit on that today, but we'll talk about reverse mortgages, co-housing, maybe renting a room to a graduate student or somebody like that if you're in a college town. And then we're going to talk about ADUs. ADUs, what are ADUs? Well, they're accessory dwelling units, and they are so interesting. So you'll want to come back next month to hear about those. And we're pretty excited about that, because housing, I mean, we all need to live in, a home of some sort, be it an apartment or a home that you own or you co-share with somebody. So please join us again. So as we wind up today, Celeste, any last minute advice on debt, because it's a big, big topic?
It is a big, big topic. If you are suffering from debt stress, or if debt is just feeling like it's more out of control than you want it to be, take stock and talk to somebody. It doesn't have to be a professional credit counselor, although that might be the way to go. But make
Yeah.
sure people in your life know what's going on. I had someone call me, an acquaintance for years and years, and he discovered that his older adult mom, who had just lost her husband, had gotten into online gambling and had racked up a lot of credit card debt. And of
Mhm.
course, then the creditors started calling and things like that. And so don't let loneliness be something that triggers you into going into debt and jeopardizing your financial situation. Take stock, write things down, and then take a deep breath and call and talk to someone that you can trust, and someone that will help not shame you
Yeah.
into doing something, but help
No, no.
help hold your hand and lead you through
Yeah.
what you need to do to get debt addressed.
Right, because shaming is paralyzing.
Absolutely.
We
Yeah,
want, helpful support, and so
absolutely.
thank you, yeah. Well, thank you, Celeste. This has been, a lot of information, and hopefully people can utilize it. And, before we sign off, we just want to say that ARP believes preparing for our financial future is all about achieving the concrete financial milestones that make sense to each of us. Even if the milestones are very modest, each one makes our financial future brighter and more secure. So that's a good wind up statement for um, this show, because we really want people to have we want them to be comfortable and not debt stressed and all of that. So with that, we'll wind up. Look for the evaluation, because as I said, they're so valuable to us, and they only take a couple minutes to fill out. So Celeste, I'll see you next month, March 16th, 10:30,
That sounds
and
great.
we'll look forward to that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.